Good day, everyone. My name is Bayo Adeni, and I will be talking about a topic which I titled Technologizing Bodily Practices. Well, I will be talking from a very personal point of view. These are my own personal interpretations of events, and it's also open for debate. And I will be using three examples in my analysis. I'll be using examples from dancers, from pilots, and from referees, because there is a kind of commonality between the three things I will be talking about here. And then first thing is the question I would like to answer, the question I would like to ask with this video is, how much of technology is too much? How far is too far? Okay, so I start with a quote from Robert where he says that, how do you marvel by a body in motion when exactly the body what you're marveled by is what is created by the editor and not the dancer? And then the other one that's about Otake, where she says that in his edit, we looked like beautifully shot dancers, but not the artists responsible for our own creativity. These two quotes here give me a kind of impression where the body and then the human body is beginning to feel like a victim. The human body here is beginning to feel like a subject to the camera or the editing. And what do I mean by this? If in this case the dancers already say that they do not have the artistic ownership of their own work, and then it feels like it's a work that is for the camera or by the camera or by the edit, they just looked like beautifully shot dancers. And then in my analysis, actually I am a dancer and a dance researcher, so I had written an article about this and dance on camera, and I used a piece called Lost in Motion. I particularly like that title because everything I will be talking about here would be centered around this idea of lost in motion. As human beings, do we get lost in motion with the use of technology? Which brings to the first question, how much of technology is too much? In the Lost in Motion one performed by Coat, the performance was nominated for Best Editing, Best Cinematography. Nothing was mentioned about the dancer. And then in the second Lost in Motion, which I analyzed, I think you can watch, but then you should watch Lost in Motion 2 and also watch Lost in Motion 2, the CGI effect making of it. And what do I want to bring out with this, the comparison of Lost in Motion, the final product, and then the making of it, is the use of CGI and slow motion effects when dancers perform, and this idea of real time and mediated time. When we see things in slow motion, it gives a different aesthetic appeal. But then in slow motion, it gives us this kind of detailed analysis that we want to see the jump in particular level. But then the idea of mediated time, which is different from what it is in real time, is also very problematic. And then this brings me to my second argument about video assistant refereeing in football. Because of course CGI is not used in football, but then slow motions are also used, which is a form of edit. And then VAR, video assistant refereeing, was brought into football to be able to solve problems like Hand of God goal by Maradona. FIFA president Infinato says that we do not want big games to be judged by human errors. Okay, but then VAR was rolled into the last World Cup. But this is also the idea of slow motion, as I mentioned in dance. If you bring it into VAR, the first argument against VAR is that it says that it would only be used in 4 match-changing situations: goals, red cards, penalties, and mistaken identity. First, we can argue what is match-changing and what is not match-changing. How does a corner kick that is wrongly given less match-changing than a penalty? This is one argument on its own. But then the other thing is that it robs off the spontaneity of the game. Something is happening in high speed in real time, and then referees have to take so long to go check the technology before they make decisions, which is rubbing off the spontaneity of the game, is rubbing off the immediacy of the game. And then also, then the idea that now football players, for every decision the referee makes, the football players are now doing this in front of the referee, telling him, please check the technology, meaning that the referee is also getting lost in this motion. If we have to bring it from the dance title, Lost in Motion, the personality of the referee is no longer that focal point of decision making. Now we have moved it towards the camera. We have moved that attention towards what the camera has to say. And also the idea of this slow motion, which I mentioned in my first example with the dancers. When a replay is shown in the VAR booth, and then they show it in slow motion. The argument against slow motion is, which I also call mediated time. Mediated time and real time are not the same. In mediated time, okay, it's slowed down, then the argument is, how can we judge impact or intention with something in slow motion? Some say slow motion makes it look worse than it is, and others say that it makes it look less. So in this situation of decision making and mediated time, real time, and the realities, we see the connect, the tussle between the human body and technology. And then the question is, humanity has been we created technology as a way to improve our lives, as a way to make, it's part of our evolution. But then our connection, our conversation, our way of dealing with technology, is it actually a dialogue? Is it a dialogue between human beings and technology, about with the camera, with the VAR, with editing? Is it a dialogue, or it's the dancing body, like the dancers in the beginning, already feeling like they are not the ones that have the artistic ownership of their work? My last example is tragically with the Boeing 737 MAX plane. Actually, I flew that plane a couple of times, at about 2 weeks even before the last crash that happened on the Ethiopian Airlines. And there's a reason I'm adding this to the argument, not just for argument's sake, but like I said, everything I say here is subjective, and then with the 737, some of the information are still speculative until the final conclusions are made from investigations that tied the two crashes with Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines. But then the speculations goes like this. The first, Boeing has been a very hugely successful airline maker with their competitor, the Airbus. Airbus and Boeing have always been in rivalry of making planes. But then the Airbus A320 was made, which was better. It was cost effective, it was consuming less fuel than the previous 737 that were the 737 NG and then the previous models of 737. Boeing then had to come up with a better idea also to counter or to rival or to match the A320 by Airbus. And then Boeing came up with the 737 MAX, which some say that even the 737 MAX was even delivered earlier than the stipulated dates that Boeing said it was going to be out. It was early. It started running earlier than its due date. And then the 737 MAX, as a plane on its own, has a different feature from its predecessors. It has slightly bigger engines, which made them put it further and then higher up than the previous 737. And in order to be able to pass through the FAA to get this plane license to be able to be used for commercial purposes, the Boeing had to install what was called the MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, on that plane. Because when the plane is flying, the air passes through the wings of the plane, up and down the wing, to be able to have it stable. And then when there is a very critical angle of attack, or the plane cannot maintain altitude, the fact that these planes have bigger engines means that there is a possibility for a stall. I cannot really explain stall. I'm not an aeronautic engineer. I am not a pilot. I do not really have so much grasp with their jargonry. But then the stall is a situation where the plane cannot maintain altitude anymore because of different angle of attack, and it's nose up, and then it's going down this way. The pilots cannot regain control of the plane. But then in order to be able to counter stall, the pilot has to bring the nose of the plane down to be able to regain control of the plane. This is what the MCAS was put in the plane to do. The MCAS would automatically bring the nose of the plane down so that pilots can regain control of the plane in the case of a stall. But then the problem that people have also come about, and then some testimonies from pilots about the 737 MAX have been that some have said that pilots that have flown the 737 MAX have been pilots that have had previous knowledge of the 737 predecessors. So they're using the knowledge of the predecessor 737 models to fly the 737 MAX without the knowledge of how the MCAS works. So they're using their knowledge, say, of the 737 NG to fly the MAX. fine, they might be typically the same brand of plane, the same maker, but there are some slight differences between these planes. And then pilots, some have said that it's because of this lack of updates or lack of education with the pilots that have caused the two crashes that have happened. Of course, these are still speculations until we get the actual verdict that comes in after the investigation. But then, apart from Boeing trying to match up Airbus or all of these speculations, also stalling MCAS and all of this, my argument still comes again as how much of technology is too much. Technology has been a very huge part of our success as human beings, but then we should not use technology at the expense of human agency. We should not use technology at the expense of humanity. Technology is supposed to be an extension of the human arm. You should not cut off the human arm to replace it with a robot. So VAR and dance on camera can cause debates with identity of who is in charge. Is it technology or man? Is it a dialogue? But then with something more fragile like an airline, it's costing lives in this case. And this is also a situation of technological advancement and decision making between man and technology. So the question is still is, how much of technology is too much, and do we have to be lost in motion in the use of all of this? Thank you.